As Charlie, his wife, and Laureen were bathing in the hot spring pool, Marcus, who had had the words "pathetic jerk" engraved on his forehead, and his plastic girlfriend, who now had a crooked nose, had hitched a ride in a dilapidated van back to the city. At this time, Marcus, who was sitting inside the van, kept his bloodied forehead covered out of fear that the van driver would see the words engraved on his forehead. Both of them had stopped the van on the way out of the Champs-Élysées Spa Resort. They had negotiated with the van driver and come to an agreement that the van driver would send both of them home for $200. Right now, all Marcus wanted was to get home as soon as possible. He did not want any more trouble. However, the van driver could see the blood that was oozing out of Marcus's forehead from the rearview mirror. After observing him for a long time, he could not help but ask in surprise, "Young man, are you hurt?" Marcus replied angrily, "This has nothing to do with you. Just continue driving safely and stop asking me so much nonsense." The driver felt a little unhappy at this and said, "Do you honestly think that I am worried about you? I am only asking you because it seems as though your forehead is bleeding continuously. I don't want you to stain my car seats with your blood." As soon as Marcus heard the van driver's words, he exploded and burst out immediately. "Damn it, you pathetic jerk! Your van is worth only about $40,000 to $50,000 at most. Are you really afraid that I will dirty your pathetic van? You are ridiculous!" Marcus was already used to using his catchphrase, "pathetic jerk," and it seemed as though he would not be able to kick this habit even if he had the words "pathetic jerk" engraved on his forehead. This was the reason why it was commonly known that it would be easy to reform a country, but it would be almost impossible to change a human's nature. The van driver never expected to be scolded by a person who was hitching a ride in his van. Therefore, he lost his temper, and he blurted out immediately, "Are you seriously uneducated? How can you possibly use such foul language?" Marcus was so annoyed at this time that he felt as though he wanted to die. When he saw the angry expression on the van driver's face, he burst out recklessly, "Damn it, don't you admit that you are just a pathetic jerk? Who the fuck do you think you are to talk to me in this manner? Do you believe that I can get someone to take your pathetic life with just a single phone call? No one would call about a pathetic jerk like you even if you were to die today." The van driver was really very angry when he heard Marcus's words. At this time, he was driving through an intersection in the city center when he saw a traffic police car parked on the corner of the intersection as there were police officers on duty. The van driver quickly drove toward the police car before he stepped out of the van and said, "Officer, there is a person who is hitching a ride in my van, and he just threatened to kill me. I suspect that he might be carrying some weapons on his body. This is a serious threat to my safety." When the police officers heard this, they quickly stepped out of their car and surrounded the van. After opening the back door, they shouted at Marcus and the plastic face who was sitting inside the van, "Put your hands up over your head and get out of the van immediately." Marcus then realized that he was in trouble. This was the downtown area. If he had to put his hands over his head to step out of the van, wouldn't it be absolutely impossible for him to hide the fact that he had the words "pathetic jerk" engraved on his forehead? Therefore, he made up his mind that he would never step out of the van, dead or alive. Marcus then said to the police officer, "What are you doing? I'm just hitching a ride home, so how am I bothering you in any way? Can you hurry up and ask the van driver to come back and drive me home right now? Otherwise, I will not let him off." When the police officers saw how arrogant and domineering Marcus was, they knew that he was definitely not a good man. Furthermore, the police officers could see Marcus covering his forehead and the blood that was constantly oozing out of it. Thus, they could only assume that he had just participated in an aggressive fight involving weapons. This kind of person typically had a criminal record, and most of them were fugitives. The police officers felt that if they were lucky, they would be able to catch one of the fugitives today. The police officers exchanged glances with one another before one of them took out the pepper spray that was used by police officers for law enforcement purposes. After that, they said to Marcus, "I am giving you one last warning. Put your hands over your head and step out of the van for inspection purposes now. Otherwise, we have no choice but to deal with you in accordance with the law." Marcus was extremely annoyed and blurted out, "Damn it, I know the captain of your team, Officer Wiles. He's a good friend of my dad. If you are not convinced, you can call him immediately and ask if he knows Marcus, the son of the owner of the Lloyd Group." The police officer sneered before he said, "The son of the Lloyd Group? You are really good at bragging. You are already hitching a ride in a van, and yet you dare to say that you are the son of the Lloyd Group? Are you telling me that the Lloyd Group cannot afford to give you a car and you have to hitch a ride in someone else's van?" Marcus really hated it when anyone doubted his identity and status. Moreover, he hated it whenever anyone tried to talk back to him or taunt him. When he saw the police officers ridiculing him, he yelled immediately, "Damn it! You are just a bunch of pathetic jerks, but you actually dare to doubt my identity? Do you believe that I'm going to call your captain right now?" The police officer replied coldly, "Okay then. You are insulting a law enforcement officer now. That means that you are blatantly resisting the law. Don't blame us for taking actions against you then." As soon as he had finished talking, the police officer took out his pepper spray and aimed it directly at Marcus's face before spraying it on the latter's face. Marcus could feel the burning pain in his eyes at this time, and he subconsciously reached out his hand to rub his eyes, completely forgetting that as soon as he removed his hands, the two bloodied words that were engraved on his forehead would be instantly exposed. "Oh my God," one of the police officers exclaimed out loud. "Just look at him. He has some words engraved on his forehead. What kind of tattoo is that? That's really very hardcore." "Ha ha ha! It's no wonder why this young kid likes to call other people a pathetic jerk. It is simply because he has the words pathetic jerk engraved on his forehead." When Marcus heard this, he hurriedly raised his hands in an attempt to cover his forehead. However, amidst all this commotion, his eyes were so swollen and painful that he did not notice the few police officers reaching out to him. Immediately afterward, Marcus was dragged out of the car before the police officers pressed him to the ground. The police officer immediately placed his hands behind his back before they handcuffed him. This way, he would not be able to try to escape, and there would be no way he could possibly cover the words pathetic jerk that were engraved on his forehead. The police officers then took Marcus and the plastic face to the side of the road before telling them to squat down there. After that, he made a phone call back to the police station to ask them to arrange for a team to come over and bring them back to the police station for further investigation. As it so happened, this was the most crowded intersection in the city center. Almost everyone passing by could see the young man with red, swollen eyes squatting down by the side of the road. However, what was most frightening was not the fact that his eyes were red and swollen because of the pepper spray. What stood out the most was the two huge words that were carved on his forehead, pathetic jerk. Many people took out their cell phones to take pictures of him, and Marcus could not help but feel very embarrassed. He jumped around on the spot as he tried to turn around so that he could have his back facing the people, and he would not be facing the passers-by. However, the police officer stopped him and held him in place before saying coldly, "Don't move. Don't you like to call everyone a pathetic jerk? Well, we are giving you the opportunity to exhibit these words to the public and citizens here." Marcus wanted to die on the spot. If he knew that things would turn out like this, he would not have offended the van driver in the first place. If he had simply tolerated and controlled his temper, he would have been home by now. Just then, an old BMW suddenly parked at the side of the road. A young man stepped out of the car before he approached Marcus and said, "Mr. Lloyd, what is going on here? Ouch! What happened to you? Who carved those words on your forehead?" Marcus had been desperately trying to hide his face as he kept his head lowered, but he suddenly heard someone referring to him as Mr. Lloyd. He truly wanted to die at this time. The last thing he wanted right now was for someone to recognize him, but someone just had to recognize him now. He was so mad and furious that he felt as though he could kill someone. He raised his head to look up at the young man who looked a little familiar to him, and he asked him immediately, "Who the hell are you?" The man hurriedly explained, "I am Harold. Harold from the Wilson family. We enjoyed a meal together before this with the young lord of the White family, Gerald. Don't you remember me?" Marcus ground his teeth and looked up at Harold before he spat a mouthful of bloody sputum at him and cursed, "Fuck you! You are just someone from the lowly Wilson family and you actually dare to come over here to insult me? Are you seeking your death?" Harold was also slowly losing his temper. What the hell was this? He had seen Marcus being handcuffed at the side of the road by the police officers. That was the reason why he decided to come over to say hello to him. However, he did not expect this guy to actually curse at him and spit at his face instead. This was fucking disgusting! Harold said angrily, "Mr. Lloyd, you are too much. I just came over to ask you about the situation out of concern since we are friends, so how can you treat me like this?" Marcus yelled immediately. "Who the fuck do you think you are? Do you really think that a poor man like you is actually worthy enough to become my friend? You are nothing more than a pathetic jerk in my eyes. Are you trying to butter up to me so that you can get closer to me? Get lost!" Harold felt seriously wronged. However, he did not dare to go against Marcus at all. After all, Harold knew very well that the Lloyd family was countless times more powerful and stronger compared to the Wilson family, who was already on the verge of bankruptcy. Harold knew that things would not end well if he offended Marcus in any way. Therefore, he could only use his sleeves to wipe the spit off his face before he said, "Sorry for offending you, Mr. Lloyd." After that, he turned around and walked back toward his car before he drove away immediately. Harold felt very angry and bitter. Who the heck did Marcus think he was? This was so maddening. At the same time, Marcus was also feeling very terrible. He could not help but sigh at his unfortunate fate. He was planning to go home in a low-key manner, but who would have known that he would turn out to be an exhibition piece at the busiest intersection in the city center instead? Many people took pictures of him with their cell phones, and some of them even posted those pictures on their social media account. There were even people who gave him the nickname Oris Hill's #1 pathetic jerk. In no time, Marcus's deed had quickly spread throughout Oris Hill. It was a very tormenting night for Charlie at the Champs-Élysées Spa Resort. He had initially been planning to share a bed with his wife, Claire. Alas, Laureen had insisted on sharing a room with Claire, saying that it would be a great opportunity for them to spend time together as best friends. Charlie did not know whether Laureen was deliberately doing this or whether it was completely unintentional. Whatever it was, Charlie could only sleep alone in the other room. The next day, Charlie was already prepared to check out and return to the city after waking up. However, the two women were still reluctant to leave, and they decided to soak in the hot spring pool for the whole morning before finally checking out reluctantly. After bathing in the hot spring pool, both women looked especially radiant and beautiful. Isaac himself came in to handle their checkout for them after their stay. He also apologized to Charlie and Claire again and again before warning all the employees on the spot that he would fire them if he found out that any of them was treating each customer differently or favoring one customer over the other. The entire workforce at the Champs-Élysées Spa Resort finally realized the importance of serving every customer in a fair manner. After that, Isaac also took the opportunity to walk Charlie and the other two women to the entrance. Isaac was initially planning to walk Charlie all the way to the car park, but Charlie gave him a subtle look before he said, "We will head to the car park to pick up our car before going back to the city directly, Mr. Cameron. You don't need to walk us there." Isaac got the hint immediately and knew that Charlie did not want him to follow them around anymore. Therefore, he quickly said respectfully, "All right then, Mr. Wade, have a safe journey home." After stepping out of the Champs-Élysées Spa Resort, Laureen stretched her waist enchantingly before she said, It was truly very comfortable to soak in the hot spring pool. Claire, if it's fine with you, wouldn't it be really nice for us to be able to stay for a few more nights before returning to the city?" Claire could only smile as she replied, "My company has just opened and there are so many things that I need to do. How could I possibly extend my stay here for a few more days?" At this time, Claire suddenly asked, "Don't you have to go back to work?" Laureen stuck out her tongue before she said, "Well, my job was originally to run around outside. Moreover, I have never met the chairman of Emgren Group before ever since I started working there. Therefore, he has no way to control me at all. In a way, I am actually an unsupervised employee, so I guess it is okay for me to skip work occasionally." After that, Laureen spoke up once again. "Since both of you have something on, I will send you home first." Upon arriving at the car park, Charlie realized that Orville was standing next to Laureen's car. Moreover, the spot where Laureen's car had been badly scratched yesterday had also been repaired. When Orville saw them walking toward the car, he immediately greeted Charlie respectfully. "Mr. Wade, did you have fun?" "Not bad." Charlie looked at the rear of the car for a few moments, and when he realized that it was looking as good as new, he knew that Orville had already arranged for it to be repaired. "You did very well." Orville hurriedly said, "Mr. Wade, I happen to know someone working at a nearby auto repair shop. Therefore, I asked some of the workers to come over with some tools to repair the car. Are you going home now? Do you need me to send a few people to escort you home?" Charlie waved his hand quickly as he turned down Orville's proposal. "No, you can get busy with your own things now. We can go back on our own." "All right then, Mr. Wade. Please do not hesitate to call me any time if you need anything else," Orville replied as he arched his hands and bowed respectfully before he left with his men. Claire could not help but shake her head helplessly as she stared at this scene. After that, she said to Charlie, "I truly do not know what is up with these people and why are they treating you so respectfully?" Charlie smiled before he said, "Can't it be just because I have my own abilities?" Claire gave him a blank look before she replied, "Do you mean your feng shui mastery skills? The more they believe in you now, the more vicious the revenge they are going to exact on you when they find out that they have been fooled by you in the future. You should really be more careful." Charlie simply smiled without arguing with Claire. After that, the three of them got into the car before heading back to the city. On the journey back, as Laureen was driving, she suddenly asked, "Claire, are both of you going home, or are you headed elsewhere?" "We're going home," Claire replied immediately. "You should also go home and rest, so that you will be fully re-energized for work on Monday." Laureen nodded before she said, "All right then, I will send both of you home before I head back to the hotel." Claire was surprised by this and asked Laureen, "Are you still staying at the hotel?" Laureen hummed as she said, "Where else would I be living if not at the hotel? I've been living at Shangri-La all this time." Claire asked again, "Isn't it very lonely for you to be living at the hotel all by yourself? Why don't you buy a house in Orris Hill instead?" Laureen smiled bitterly before she replied, "It's more troublesome and even lonelier for me to buy a house here. It's much better for me to live at the hotel. After all, there is someone to clean up my room every day, and I can also call for room service and food delivery whenever I feel like eating. Moreover, I can even get someone to do my laundry for me and send it up to my room when it's dried and ironed." For people like Laureen who came from a rich family, they often relied on spending money to save time and effort. Claire continued asking, "Then what is going on with your family? Has your cousin been targeting you lately?" "Not anymore," Laureen replied immediately. "However, I have already filed a lawsuit with my family, but they said that there is insufficient evidence, and they cannot be sure that everything that I said is true. Nevertheless, my cousin seems to have stopped trying to do anything funny, and I have a feeling that he won't dare to do anything to me anymore." As she said that, Laureen looked at Charlie, who was sitting in the back seat through the rearview mirror, and made a thank you gesture at him. She knew very well that Charlie was the one who had warned those in the Thomas family who were targeting her at that time. This was the reason why they had been so restrained lately. Therefore, Laureen really could not keep count of the number of times that Charlie had already saved her. Claire suddenly felt very distressed for Laureen. Her best friend had come to Orris Hill to work, and yet she could only live in a hotel by herself all this while. Moreover, she was also betrayed, targeted, and hunted down by her own family. As she thought about this, Claire suddenly said to Laureen, "Laureen, the White family gave Charlie a villa at Thompson First. When the renovation for the villa is completed, you can move in and live with us." "Really?" Laureen asked, as she was very excited at this point. Claire smiled before she replied, "Of course. You're my best friend, Laureen, so why would I possibly lie to you?" Very soon, the pair of best friends, Claire and Laureen, had made a pact to live together in the villa at Thompson First in the future. Both the women were very happy at this time, but Charlie was a little depressed. Claire was indeed a very innocent person. She did not even realize that Laureen had always been trying to get closer to her husband. Claire even invited Laureen to move into their villa to live with them. His silly wife, she was inviting and leading a wolf directly into their room. However, Charlie could not explicitly refuse this kind of thing. Moreover, he did not have a solid reason to refuse. Therefore, even if he was dissatisfied, he could only hide his feelings for the time being. On the other hand, Laureen was extremely ecstatic. If she could truly move into the villa with them, she could spend time with Charlie day and night. In that case, the possibility of her getting together with Charlie was much greater. After a short while, they finally arrived in front of their house. After bidding farewell to Laureen, Claire and Charlie got out of the car as they got ready to step into the house. Just then, an old man saw both of them getting out of the car, and he hurriedly walked over to meet them. Charlie could tell that it was Douglas at a single glance. Claire was very excited when she saw Douglas, and she greeted him before she said respectfully, "Dr. Simmons, why are you here? I have not had the opportunity to thank you properly for saving my father the last time." Douglas hurriedly waved his hand before he said, "Mrs. Wade, you don't have to be so polite. You are most welcome. I do not dare to take all the credit for everything that happened last time. The reason why I am here today is because there is something that I have to discuss with Mr. Wade. Why don't you come into the house and talk instead? My father has a good tea collection, and since you are here, he will surely be more than happy to take it out to entertain you," Claire said as she tried to invite Douglas into the house. However, Douglas smiled before he politely declined her invitation. "I just have a few words that I want to say to Mr. Wade, so I do not want to bother you or your father today." When Charlie heard the polite exchange of words between the both of them, he knew that it would never end. Therefore, he interjected them immediately as he said, "Claire, why don't you go into the house first? I will just talk to Dr. Simmons for a short while." Following that, Claire quickly replied, "All right then, make sure that you give Dr. Simmons the best treatment that you can." Claire turned around to go into the house only after Charlie had nodded in agreement. After Claire had left, Douglas bowed respectfully to Charlie before he said, "Mr. Wade, I am looking for you because there is something that I have to report to you." Charlie nodded and said, "Please go ahead and speak." Douglas hurriedly replied, "There will be a Chinese medicine expo in Aurus Hill tomorrow, and I heard that there will be a 300-year-old purple ginseng to be auctioned off. The whole Chinese medical profession is extremely shaken by this news because it is really rare for such a medicine to be auctioned off at an expo like this. Therefore, I would like to ask you if you would like to go and have a look at it with me tomorrow." A 300-year-old purple ginseng? Charlie could not help but think to himself for a moment. According to the records in the Nine Heavens Profound book, the purple ginseng was indeed a very rare and good herb. Moreover, a 300-year-old purple ginseng was a very rare and precious medicinal material. If he could lay his hands on this rare treasure, he would be able to refine some very powerful pills, such as the rejuvenation pill that could even bring the dead to life. As he thought about this, Charlie nodded before he promised, "All right then, I will go and take a look with you." Douglas hurriedly replied, "Okay, Mr. Wade, I will go and sort out the invitation letter immediately. I will come and pick you up in the morning tomorrow." "All right, it's a date." "Then I will take my leave first," Douglas said as he bowed respectfully. "Please go ahead." Charlie nodded before he turned around and walked into his house. Early the next morning, Douglas came over to pick Charlie up so that they could head to the Chinese Medicine Expo. Charlie did not expect that the Chinese Medicine Expo would also be held at the Aurus Hill Exhibition and Convention Center that was owned by the Grant family. The last time that he was here, Jason had been very arrogant in front of him. However, at this point, Jason and his father, Justin, had already been turned into ashes, and there were completely no traces of them in this world anymore. This corresponded with the phrase, "Her face is gone now, where to unknown yet. Peach bloom beams on a spring wind's flow." As soon as Charlie stepped into the exhibition and convention center, he looked around the building and realized that there were missing persons notices of Jason and Justin on the walls. The Grant family had already increased the cash reward to $30 million, but there was still no news of the father and son's whereabouts at all. No matter what it was, these efforts were destined to be futile. When Charlie and Douglas walked into the hall, they saw Graham and Aurora immediately. The Quinton family engaged in all kinds of business involving medicinal herbs and materials. Therefore, they were also one of the exhibitors at the Chinese Medicine Expo and had to come early in the morning to prepare for the exhibition. As soon as Graham saw Charlie, he stepped forward excitedly before he bowed and said respectfully, "Mr. Wade, you're here." Aurora seemed to be a little worried, and she looked extremely haggard at this time. However, as soon as she saw Charlie, she was in a much better mood and walked up to him shyly before she bowed respectfully. Then she smiled before she greeted him. "Hello, Mr. Wade." Charlie nodded slightly, and after staring at Aurora for a moment, he knew that she was hiding something. However, since she did not want to say anything, he did not want to pry into her personal matters. Therefore, he simply said, "Aurora, you do not look very well. You should rest more." Aurora blushed as soon as she heard Charlie's words because she truly did not expect Charlie to worry or show any concern for her at all. Moreover, this was the first time he had expressed concern for herself. Aurora could not help but feel very happy, and she could only nodded repeatedly. At this time, Graham also said respectfully, "Mr. Wade, are you here for the 300-year-old purple ginseng?" Charlie nodded before he asked, "Do you have any inside news about it?" Graham smiled before he said, "This 300-year-old super high-quality purple ginseng has been acquired by a medicinal herb company near the mountains in the northeast. I heard that the starting price for the auction this time is $5 million. In fact, $5 million is not a very high price because purple ginseng is actually worth a lot of money. It is estimated that the final bid will definitely end up being more than $30 million in the end, since the price-performance ratio would not be too high." Charlie nodded in acknowledgement. High-quality purple ginseng was of little use to any ordinary people or Chinese doctors. The purple ginseng, Ganoderma lucidum, or also known as the Cordyceps sinensis, were all precious and rare medicinal herbs that would basically have little to no use at all if they were eaten directly. They would have the effect of strengthening the body, but they would not have the ability to cure any diseases at all. Therefore, if someone wanted to exert a good medicinal herb to its maximum effect and potential, it would have to depend on the combination of the prescription and the person's ability to refine and concoct the medicine. The prescription was, in fact, the most important thing. The same 10 medicinal materials used to form a prescription could either cure a disease or kill a person. After all, the fundamental importance lies in the different proportions of the 10 different medicinal herbs. Simply put, a difference in the proportions of the medicinal herbs could produce such a big gap and difference. What more if there were several different medicinal herbs in the prescription itself? Aside from a good prescription, the ability to refine good medicinal herbs into a good medicine was also very important. If someone did not have enough ability to refine or concoct a good medicine, even the most powerful medicine would become an ordinary one. If the person had a very strong ability, then even an ordinary medicine could turn out to be an extraordinary one. Moreover, if a person was excellent in all the various aspects, an extraordinary medicine with 10 points could turn out to be a miracle pill worth 100 points. Charlie was the kind of person who could turn an extraordinary medicine into a miracle pill. Coupled with his secret prescriptions, he would be able to concoct and produce really rare and magical medicines. Therefore, the purple ginseng would prove to be very useful to him, and it would not make much sense if it ended up in someone else's hands. If Charlie could get his hands on the purple ginseng, he would be able to refine and concoct a medicine that was even better than the pill he had given to each of them the last time. At this time, Charlie suddenly heard several familiar voices behind him. One man suddenly said, "Chairman Wilson, don't worry. As long as we can get our hands on the 300-year-old purple ginseng, we will have all the medicinal herbs that we need for our new prescription to be completed. By then, we will definitely be able to cure your disease. Everything will be as good as new then." The man who had just spoken was none other than Jeffrey from the Weaver family. He was also the same man who had been forced to lick the urinal just a few days ago. At this time, Kenneth from the Wilson family in Eastcliff said, "Oh, I really have to thank you in advance then, Brother Jeffrey. When my illness is cured, I will definitely strengthen all the collaborations with the Weaver family. When that happens, my family and I will definitely give and provide all the resources that the Weaver family needs in the future. I assure you that our strong alliance will definitely last a lifetime." Jeffrey was very excited when he heard this, and he replied, "Then I will also have to thank you in advance, Chairman Wilson. Ha ha ha!" Charlie turned around and saw that it was none other than Jeffrey and Kenneth who were walking towards him at this time. Moreover, Wendy was also accompanying the both of them. Right now, Wendy no longer had the embarrassed and humiliated look that she had when she had been forced to lick the urinals the other day. She held a limited edition Hermes bag in one hand as she held onto Jeffrey's arm with her other hand. Currently, she had a very arrogant look on her face, almost as though she was a socialite from the upper-class family. There was a man following behind them, and he somewhat resembled Jeffrey. Charlie did not know this guy as he had never seen him before. This person was none other than Liam, Jeffrey's half-brother, the illegitimate child who had always been dismissed by the Weaver family. As soon as Charlie saw them, the few people also noticed Charlie standing in front of them. Kenneth, Jeffrey, and Wendy all had a deep hatred of Charlie, and all three of them hated him to the core. As soon as they saw him, they were suddenly filled with anger, and they really felt like tearing him apart right then and there. Jeffrey was even more angry and frustrated when he saw Charlie. He felt as though he could feel the extremely disgusting taste and smell of the urinals in his mouth as soon as he saw Charlie. Wendy, too, could not help but feel like retching as she thought about what had happened a few days ago. Even after so many days had passed, she still could not taste anything with her tongue, and she felt as though there was a stinky, lingering taste on her tongue. All of this was all because of Charlie. As soon as they saw Charlie, Kenneth, who had the strongest background and was the most powerful amongst the three of them, took the lead to speak. He ground his teeth before saying, "It turns out that it's you. It seems as though we meet again, you piece of trash." Charlie smiled indifferently before saying, "Last time you were calling me your father and grandfather in such a refreshing manner. Now that we're meeting again, you are already calling me a different name. You really are a very unfilial grandson, don't you think?" Kenneth clenched his fists tightly together, and there was hatred in his eyes as soon as he heard Charlie's words. That incident had made him lose face, and it had somehow made him lose his manhood as well. It was the biggest embarrassment and the greatest shame that he had ever felt in his life. However, Kenneth knew that he could not possibly beat Charlie, and besides, he did not have the guts to challenge him again. Therefore, he could only sneer as he said, "A good man will not suffer from any immediate losses. You are just a piece of trash, so what would you know about all this anyway? Don't think that you are that great just because you know how to fight. This world is a very dark place, so you better be careful when you are walking alone at night." Charlie sneered in response. "Well, I think you can only bend, but you cannot stretch now, right? So, have you been able to regain your manhood during this time?" Kenneth ground his teeth angrily when he heard Charlie saying that he could bend but could not stretch. "Don't be so arrogant," Kenneth cursed at Charlie. "I will definitely regain my manhood sooner or later. When that time comes, I will not spare you at all," Douglas reprimanded Kenneth at this time. "Kenneth, I've already warned you many times not to be disrespectful and impolite toward Mr. Wade. You should not be offending Mr. Wade. If you target Mr. Wade again, don't blame me for turning my back on you in the future." Kenneth became even more frustrated and furious when he saw Douglas speaking up for Charlie. In fact, his mother had been urging him to repair and make amends to his relationship with Douglas as soon as possible. Moreover, she also wanted Kenneth to invite Douglas to attend her 84th birthday party at Eastcliff. However, Douglas was truly very stubborn. Kenneth did not understand why Douglas would be hanging around this piece of trash Charlie all the time. Why was he so polite and respectful toward him? However, Kenneth did not dare to disobey or be disrespectful toward Douglas in public. Therefore, he could only say angrily, "Uncle Simmons, you should keep your eyes wide open. There are so many scammers in this world nowadays, and there are many elderly people who are deceived by those who have ulterior motives in this society. Some of them are also leading you to buy and believe in all of their lies so that you would recognize them as your master. However, you should make sure that you do not fall for these kinds of shrewd tricks." At this time, Jeffrey, who was standing at the side, also smiled disdainfully as he said, "These kinds of trashy liars can only survive in a small place like Orris Hill. However, he will only be able to jump around and continue cheating people for a few more days. After all, wouldn't he be afraid that his tricks will be unveiled and people would find out that they had been cheated all along? I think it will only be a matter of time before everyone discovers that they have been deceived by him." Charlie simply smiled as he said, It seems as though the toilet at the Glorious Club was not big enough. You still have a very stinky mouth. Well, the toilets at the Oris Hill Exhibition and Convention Center are very big. I think there are about 20 or 30 urinals in the men's toilet. Do you want to try it too? The expression on Jeffrey's face was very ugly at this time, and he was also a little afraid. He stuttered as he said, You don't think that you can just make a fool of me and do whatever you want in Oris Hill? Graham had been standing at the back as he watched the entire scene unfolding before him. When he saw Jeffrey targeting and insulting Charlie, Graham immediately stepped up to defend Charlie with a cold expression on his face. "Jeffrey, who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to speak to Mr. Wade in this manner?" The Quinton family was one of the Weaver family's biggest medicinal herb suppliers. Moreover, both their families had already been collaborating and working together for the longest time. Graham really did not expect Jeffrey to be so impolite and disrespectful toward Charlie. Truth be told, Jeffrey had not seen Graham earlier because he had been so caught up with Charlie's sudden appearance. At this time, Jeffrey simply glanced at Graham before he said in disdain, "Graham, our families have been working together for more than 10 years now, so why are you defending and speaking up for this piece of trash?" Graham snorted before he said, "Mr. Wade's ability is not something that someone like you would ever be able to comprehend. If you insult Mr. Wade, you are also insulting the Quinton family. If that is the case from now on, the Quinton family will cut off all ties and all forms of collaboration with the Weaver family. We will no longer supply any medicinal herbs to the Weaver family in the future." The expression on Jeffrey's face changed slightly as soon as he heard Graham's words. He knew that they would definitely be in trouble if they lost all supplies from the Quinton family, as they were one of their biggest suppliers. However, Jeffrey did not want to lose face if he gave in. Therefore, he ground his teeth before he replied coldly, "The Weaver family will continue to prosper in the pharmaceutical industry even without the supplies of medicinal herbs from the Quinton family. However, I am afraid that the future of the Quinton family will not be all that bright if you cut off all ties and collaborations with us. Am I right about that?" Graham remained absolutely calm and composed as he said, "The Quinton family's medicinal herbs are well known throughout the country. Even if we lose out on our collaboration with you, it will not leave a huge impact on the Quinton family. However, if the Weaver family loses the Quinton family's medicinal herbs and materials, I can't wait to see how you are going to guarantee the quality of the medicine that you produce in the future." At this time, the middle-aged man behind Jeffrey suddenly stepped up to apologize to Graham. "Sorry, Mr. Quinton. Please do not mind my elder brother. He was just joking earlier. Our families have been cooperating and working together for so long, so we should not just terminate our cooperation in such a rash manner. It would not do either of us any good at all." Before he could even finish speaking, Jeffrey turned around and kicked him before he said, "Liam, who told you that you have the right to speak up here? How am I supposed to deal with you now? Do you even know your own place and status? You are nothing more than a worthless bastard child. If you continue speaking nonsense here, I will send you back to where you belong." Liam fell to the ground as soon as Jeffrey kicked him in the stomach. He could only hold on to his stomach as his face flushed red from the pain. However, he did not dare to say anything anymore. Liam simply stood up quietly before he stood behind Jeffrey once more without saying anything anymore. At this time, Charlie glanced at Liam once again. Charlie felt as though he could see a shadow of his former self in Liam. He was despised, looked down upon, and even humiliated by others, but he could only choose to bear it and stay hidden as he waited quietly for his chance to rise. Just then, Wendy nudged Jeffrey before she said, "My dear, don't get angry because of a piece of trash and a worthless bastard child. Let's go in and check out the expo now." Jeffrey nodded immediately. Charlie was simply a piece of trash to him, and Liam was just a bastard child in his eyes. Even if he had already suffered a huge loss because of Charlie, he really did not think that Charlie was a great or incredible person at all. However, Jeffrey was still waiting for an opportunity to retaliate against Charlie and relieve all his hatred. For his part, Charlie could not be bothered to continue arguing with this group of people. After all, the only reason why he had come to the Chinese Medicine Expo was simply because of the 300-year-old purple ginseng. As for Kenneth and Jeffrey, if they continued to taunt him and act as though they could deal with him, he would definitely take his time to deal with them slowly. After Kenneth, Jeffrey, and the others had walked away, Anthony shook his head before he sighed and said, "This Kenneth is really too self-conceited." Graham also chimed in and said, "Mr. Wade, Dr. Simmons, why don't we go into the hall as well? Don't let those people ruin or affect our mood today." Charlie smiled as he said, "Of course, don't worry. I will not be affected because of a bunch of clowns." The few of them walked into the center of the exhibition hall and saw that there were various exhibition counters for all sorts of different Chinese medicinal herbs and materials. There were many different medicinal herbs and materials on display. Graham quickly invited Charlie to check out his booth. The Quinton family was worthy of being recognized as a medicinal herb and material dealer for a history of over a century. Their booth had more than a dozen display cabinets, and a variety of medicinal herbs and materials filled the countertops. Graham told Charlie, "Mr. Wade, if there are any medicinal herbs and materials that you need, please do not hesitate to let me know. I will give it to you immediately." Charlie nodded before he said, "After getting my hands on the 300-year-old purple ginseng, I will be able to concoct a new medication. I will tell you what kind of herbs and materials I will need at that time." Graham replied immediately, "No problem, Mr. Wade. If you have any requests, just say the word, and I will definitely do my best to get anything done for you." Charlie continued looking around the exhibition hall, but he did not see any medicinal herbs or material worthy of his attention. This made him feel somewhat disappointed. It seemed as though most of the medicine and herbs here could only be regarded as ordinary goods. There was nothing special about it at all. After walking around for a short while, it was almost time for the auction. Thus, Charlie headed straight for the auction hall with Graham and Douglas. The entire auction hall accommodated a few thousand seats, and it was a very large and spacious area. There was a transparent booth with glass on all sides set up at the front of the auction hall, and the 300-year-old purple ginseng sat in the center of the booth. Charlie was extremely delighted when he saw the purple ginseng. He could immediately perceive the strong medicinal power and properties of the purple ginseng. According to his knowledge and eyesight, even though it was said that this purple ginseng was 300 years old, it was in fact almost 400 years old, and the quality of this purple ginseng was even better than what he had imagined. There were many kinds of ginseng in this world: common ginseng, American ginseng, red ginseng, purple ginseng, and wild ginseng. Amongst them, the rarest and most expensive of them all was none other than the purple ginseng. Moreover, ginseng itself had a lifespan, and most of them could not live for more than 100 years. Therefore, if a ginseng plant was not picked, it could easily become a century-old ginseng or a few hundred-year-old ginseng. After that, it would eventually come to an end. Any ginseng that could live for 200 or 300 years was the best type of ginseng. Furthermore, any ginseng that could live for more than 500 years was very precious and extremely rare. Some people who had been collecting ginseng for their entire life might not even have the chance to see it at all. As for the ginseng that was more than 1,000 years old, it was even more valuable than anything. It almost only existed in legends, and it was really rare for anyone to take it out at all. Therefore, this 300-year-old purple ginseng was already an extremely precious and valuable treasure. At this time, the auction hall was already overcrowded with people. Most of them were people who came from the Chinese medicine field who had come from all over the country. There were also some old Chinese doctors who could be called the masters of Chinese medicine. Amongst them, many people were familiar with Douglas, and upon seeing Douglas, most of them quickly stepped forward to congratulate him. Truthfully, the reason why they were congratulating him was because he had successfully created a miracle in medicine history by successfully curing paraplegia. However, deep down, Douglas felt ashamed. Everyone thought that he was responsible for treating the high-level paraplegia, but he was the only one who knew that the credit belonged to Charlie and Charlie alone. However, Charlie wanted to keep a low profile, and that was the reason why he wanted Douglas to take the credit for the cure instead. At this time, many people gathered around Douglas as they asked him about the secret to curing paraplegia. Douglas quickly replied, "Actually, I was not the one who had the skill and ability to cure high paraplegia. In fact, A magical medicine that I obtained by chance exerted a huge therapeutic effect for the patient. Someone asked immediately, "Dr. Simmons, can you publish the prescription for this magic medicine? Once it is published, it will definitely benefit all mankind." "That's right," someone chimed in immediately before he said, "Dr. Simmons, after you publish the prescription for the magic medicine, you may even get a Nobel Prize in medicine." Douglas simply brushed them off as he said, "Forget it. It is indeed a hidden secret that would be very inconvenient for me to reveal." Just then, a young man dressed in a suit and leather shoes approached Douglas before he bowed slightly and said, "Hello, Dr. Simmons. My name is Ikaro Kobayashi, and I am the chairman of Kobayashi Pharma." Douglas nodded slightly before he said, "I have heard about Kobayashi Pharma before. Is there a reason why you are looking for me today?" Ikaro looked at Douglas with a serious expression on his face before saying, "Dr. Simmons, our Kobayashi Pharma is the strongest pharmaceutical company in the whole of Asia. There were many popular classic drugs that were developed and produced by Kobayashi Pharma. I believe that with such strength and power, we definitely have the ability to support and carry forward your prescription for the high-level paraplegia so that we can sell the medicine to more than 200 countries around the world. Therefore, I sincerely hope that you are willing to sell the prescription to us." Douglas frowned as soon as he heard the other party's words. After that, he said, "If I remember correctly, many of the medicine and drugs that you carry were not developed by your company. In fact, those medicines were prescriptions from Chinese medication. The so-called Japanese medications were all actually ancient Chinese medication prescriptions. Since Japan and Korea were deeply influenced by Chinese culture in ancient times, it was only natural that their medicine was also taught and learned from Chinese medication. Now, all the pharmaceutical companies in those two countries were all engaging in selling prescriptions that they claimed to be their own when they had clearly plagiarized the Chinese medications. Because these ancient Chinese medications were recorded in some pharmacopoeias, there was no clear patent copyright protection on those prescriptions. This was the reason why many Japanese and Korean pharmaceutical companies could plagiarize various prescriptions from the Chinese medicine dictionary. After that, they produced the medicine and drugs as their own before selling it all over the world. It would have been fine if they made it clear that these medications in fact originated from ancient Chinese prescriptions. However, these companies were always very shameless, and they always publicized that they were the ones who had developed and come up with the prescriptions on their own. Moreover, there were even some shameless people who would describe the ancient Chinese medications as a medicinal prescription that had been handed down to them by their ancestors in their own country. That was the main reason why many consumers around the world thought that these medicines were really the historical heritage of Japan and Korea. This kind of blatant plagiarism had made Douglas and many old Chinese medicine practitioners feel really indignant. At this time, Ikaro suddenly said arrogantly, "Dr. Simmons, I want to correct your mistake. All of the medicines and drugs at Kobayashi Pharma have been developed and produced by our company based on the essence of our Japanese traditional medication.